eggs on the plate for breakfast. It might have been the fork. It might have been something you noticed. But I want you to try to focus on just the simplest, ordinary thing that you can think of. And as you take in a breath, as when we listen to the bowl start ringing, as you take in your breaths, I want you to try to focus on that small thing as gift. It may not make much sense, but for now, to just see it as gift and then to exhale as gratitude. And let that be part of our prayer this morning. If it helps to close your eyes, but to see that image, that object. Our lives are filled with such huge problems. Our world overwhelmed by such massive trends and critical needs, and our daily lives demanding and overwhelming at times. And we look for big answers, for quick, sure answers to these overwhelming issues. And we forget to see that in each moment, in every step, we are surrounded with abundance. In the simplest of experiences, in the simplest of objects that lay about us, we are gifted with this abundance that we overlook. Holy One, may we be not simply present, may we participate in seeing and reflecting the simple presence of joy that is with us always and in every place. And in even the most difficult, challenging moments, may we look to the simplest of objects to remind us that we are sustained with abundance all about us. For this we give thanks. Amen.
Let's write a story of a tidal wave. We run out of luck, we run out of days, we run out of gas, 100 miles away from a station. There's a war and a plague, smoke and disaster, lions in the Coliseum, screams of laughter, motherless children, a witness and a Bible, nothing but rain ahead, no chance for our survival. Just before the flood comes, just before the night falls, just before the blood runs into the valley, just before my eyes close, just before we can't go no further. Love throws a line I heard someone calling me from very far away. Sister, oh sister, did I hear them say, prisoner of this endless story of pain, you hold the key, try to find a way. Just before the flood comes, just before the night falls, just before the blood runs into the valley, just before my eyes go, just before it all blows to pieces. Love thrown light to you and me. Love throw light. Love throw light. Love throw light. Love throw light. Love, you better pick up your pace if we're gonna win this race. Love, will run out of time. Pull yourself from behind. Love, throw a line. Love, throw a line. Love, throw a line. Love, throw a line.
Oh, and I'm not here. I missed that band. Y'all are fabulous, all of you. Thank you. Well, as Tom said, we just got back from Santa Fe, and such a refreshing time and such an inspiring time. So it's good to be back, though. It really is good to be back. Before we left, I had heard a story on NPR. It was a podcast. How many of you listened? Did you ever listen to Snap Judgment? Some of you, yeah. Boy, often just some really good stuff on there. And this one hit me, and I thought, there's a sermon right there. So I'll tell you my story. It's a story about, it was a man they were interviewing named, he was a rabbi. I'm going to call him John. And it was a story about a man named Larry Trapp. Larry Trapp was the grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan in the state of Nebraska. And he was a passionate man with a mission. And the story that was told on NPR was about when the rabbi and his family moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, which is where Larry Trapp was living. And while they were unpacking their belongings, the phone rang, and the rabbi picked it up. "You'll be sorry you ever moved into that house," said a voice, and then it hung up. Well, the next day they got another phone call, same thing. String of insults, derogatory, name-calling, horrible things that were said, racist. Hung up again. Well, this time the rabbi, John, called the police. And when they came, got all the information, the officer said, I think I know who this is. He's quite a famous or notorious white supremacist. His name is Larry Trapp. And a very hate-filled person. And I'm going to tell you something, said the officer. You need to tell your kids, don't go to school and come home the same way every day, because they need to be careful. Of course, that frightened him, and a couple of days later, a package arrived in their mail. The rabbi got it and opened it, and it was filled with pamphlets and books, horrible things, very racist, very, very ugly, horrible, hate-filled literature. And one that he pulled out, he described it, he said it was a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. with a gun sight printed on his forehead, and at the bottom it said, "Our dream came true." And then it was signed, "The KKK is watching you, scum." Well, after a while, John said, I started thinking that maybe it would be a good thing to try to contact Larry Trapp, and my plan was to see if he would talk to me. Maybe some good could come out of it, or at least maybe I could get it off my chest. Leave my family alone. I don't know. I dialed his number, got the answering machine, which spewed out a diatribe of hate that went on and on. He said it was disgusting. And then he said, I decided, I'm just going to leave Larry Trapp a message, a love note. And he said, I became a little obsessed with the idea of contacting him, so I'd just call and leave little messages of love, my little love notes for Larry Trapp. So he said, the first message I left was, gosh, Larry, why do you like the Nazis so much? They would have killed you first. See, Larry was a double amputee. This is what the rabbi had found out, and he lived his life in a wheelchair. And then the second message, he said, Larry, there's a lot of love out here, but you're not getting any of it. What's the matter with you? And just things like that. And seems that he would do this every week. He taught a bar mitzvah class on Thursdays at 3:30, and so at 3 o'clock, he would call Larry Trapp and leave a love message for him, and then go in and teach his bar mitzvah class. And then, of course, as you would expect, the phone rang again. It was Larry. Rabbi answers the phone. Hello? Why are you calling me? Why are you harassing me with these messages you keep leaving on my answering machine? Stop it. You're just hassling me. And he said, I can't really use the language he used, but it was something like that. And the rabbi said, Larry, I don't want to hassle you. I just want to talk to you. Well, what do you want to talk about? He said, well, for one thing, I heard you were disabled. I thought you might need a ride to the grocery. Long silence. I got that covered. He said, don't call me anymore. But John didn't stop. Every Thursday, 3 o'clock, little love message on Larry Trapp's answering machine. Saturday night, the phone rings. John picked it up. It was Larry. What can I do for you, Larry? He said. And Larry said, I want to get out of what I'm doing, and I don't know how. John said he would come over to his house, come by, talk to him. His son was sitting in the room when he hung up. He goes, Dad, you can't do that. He said, well, yeah, I think I'm going to go. I think I'm going to pick up some chicken or something and go break bread with the guy. Dad, when a Nazi says he wants to have you over for dinner, he means that literally. But John and his wife Julie brought food over to Larry's house, and when he opened the door, there was Larry sitting in this wheelchair with a MAC-10 automatic weapon and a small pistol in his lap and a shotgun hanging off the corner of his wheelchair. And of course, the first thing they thought was, oh my gosh, this is an ambush. We're going to get killed. But instead, Larry reached out his hand to shake the rabbi's hand, and he burst into tears. And then he couldn't speak, and so he just began to take these rings off of his fingers. They were 2 large swastika Nazi rings, and he took them off and he handed them to Larry. He said, take these. I don't want them anymore. They've caused me nothing but trouble all my life. So John and Julie went inside, sat down with Larry and began to talk, shared a meal with each other. Larry told him about his childhood, about growing up in a really racist, hate-filled family. Said his father used to hide under the bed to keep his dad from beating him. He said, all I've ever heard was racism, violence, hatred, bigotry. It's all I ever knew. I never knew joy. I never knew hope. I never knew kindness. So that night, Larry Trapp said he was going to live a different way. John's simple, weekly messages of compassion had broken down the thick hide of a lifetime of hatred. They were not big acts. They were just simple love messages from a man who had every reason to be afraid, every reason to seek revenge, every reason to go on the attack, but he didn't. Instead, he took his one ordinary life, he offered it to God, as an offering and a gesture of love in this world, and he responded to his nemesis, to his fears for his family, for himself, in much the same way that we read earlier that Paul was telling the Christians in Rome to do. Paul advising his followers to show love even in their own turbulent times. You know, and Tom mentioned this earlier, and I guess it's been on all our minds, even being out of town and out of contact for a week. Even when I left, there was still so much. You know, there were the shootings in Dallas. And then after that, I was in the car, and I remember hearing something on the news about police officers being shot. Well, that one was in Baton Rouge. And then you see the videos of these police violence and pulling people over for no good reason. And Tom and I have a little neighbor boy. I think I've mentioned it before. 21st birthday, got drunk, and officers shot him. Sweetest kid you'd ever know. It's a violent world. It's a troubling world. We don't even know who our enemy is anymore. It used to be soldiers in this color army and this color army, but now you don't know. It's just somebody with a bomb walking into a mall. Our son's living in Germany now, where it scares us. We hear about the bombing in Munich. It's everywhere, isn't it? It's just infused. And so, to be honest, it just begins to eat away at me in ways that it doesn't bring out the best in me. Fear does not bring out the best in me. I can come up here and I can teach a lesson on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. I can go in the sanctuary and lead a prayer for peace, and then get in my car and be reminded on the news of all the violence in the world. And by the time I get home, I just feel all the rage welling up in me, and I want to react with violence and anger back at all this. Just do something about it. Practice what you preach, I think, but when the reality hits so very close to home, words of love and compassion just doesn't satisfy those heightened fears and feelings that everything's just out of control. Somebody needs to take charge. I'm not proud of it. Am I alone? Seems I'm not alone in exhibiting what theologians call the human condition, which is really just a fancy way of saying our impulse reactions to threat and violence and fear is to get angry, to get built up bravado, vengeance, and violence. It's what happens when our reptilian brain takes over. The reptilian brain, the knee-jerk reactions. It's our lowest level of thinking, but that's what we go to, or at least a lot of us. We strive all our lives to rise above it. We try to teach our children more rational and compassionate ways to live out their lives, and resources that won't lead to more violence. But fear just has a way of negating all that and triggering that reptilian brain. So with all that in mind, as I was looking at this passage from Romans, we have Paul here, who's writing to a small group of Christians in this big, culturally advanced city of Rome. And I love this interpretation of Eugene Peterson's. It says, I liked that version because it's just so simple and down to earth, and other versions are beautiful, but this one just sort of hit me where I was, just sort of plain spoken about how God would have us live our one precious, ordinary, maybe life. I read that someone called these words from Paul his own version of the Sermon on the Mount. And I thought about that. The church in Rome was in trouble. Inside, they were bickering with each other. And outside the church, they certainly weren't witnessing to lives of love out there in the community. They were bickering with their neighbors of other religions as well. I wrote in the blog about what Barbara Brown Taylor had to say about it. So let me use her description. There were black eyes and bad feelings all over that church in Rome. Marcus went to the midweek service so he wouldn't have to sit in the same room with Clovis on Sunday. Lucius was so mad at both of them that he quit coming to church at all. And Chloe, well, she just bought herself a pit bull to keep her pagan neighbors from cutting through her yard. It was a mess all the way around. Well, Sound familiar? Church. Here was a small group of people who had experienced the love and grace of God, experienced it personally. People whose lives then had been transformed as they experienced the life and teachings and resurrection of Jesus. They had come to a new way of seeing life, a new way of understanding the world, and a new way of following the ways of Jesus, who they knew to be the Prince of Peace, the light in the darkness, the hope for the world. But after the hymns were sung, the affirmations recited, scriptures read, and prayers prayed, they left, went back home to ordinary life and what Paul calls the ways of the world. The reptilian brain took over. They proclaimed with their lips to be followers of love and grace until someone crossed them. And then it was, Katie, bar the door. I'll show them. I'll retaliate. They'll be sorry they ever crossed me. I don't know if anybody else ever said anything like that. Turns out all that goodness and love and healing, all that reconciliation and peace, turns out that's not what they really believed in at all. Maybe because deep down they and even us, in our most basic instinct, we believe that goodness and grace is weak and soft and simply not a good weapon against evil. Maybe something deep down inside of us is convinced that if we don't fight back, we're going to get annihilated. So stand up for yourself. Dog eat dog. But there it is. Paul's words echoing Jesus' words, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Don't. Don't let evil take away your best self. It does. Bless your enemies. Don't hit back. Discover beauty in everyone. Everyone. And if you want to get the best of evil, says Paul, do good. Now, I don't have to tell you that that takes a great deal of trust in God and faith. Well, Paul had it, but he's Paul. It's not me. I'm not Paul. It's the kind of faith we might say we have, but we'd rather not have it tested in real life, right? They're beautiful words. You know, I often have to wonder if the real enemy of the gospel is not the other out there, but those of us who claim to be that body of Christ in this world, but not actually being the body of Christ. Not our best selves. When we repay violence with violence, hate with hate. Paul says, bless those who persecute you. Bless them. Don't curse them. Because the moment you curse them, you join them. And it may feel really, really good in the moment, but in truth, you've simply surrendered your best self and you've lost the way that leads to peace. It's an incredible dare that Paul gives us. I dare you. It's incredible. No wonder Paul said in another one of his letters that, you live out this life and people are going to think you're fools. Because those ways of love and peace, they look foolish to the world. But we've got to be the ones who break the violence, the cycle of violence and revenge, hate and anger. A friend of mine sent this to me on a Facebook post. It said, yes, I believe God can move mountains. But don't be surprised if God hands you a shovel. We saw on the way home, I just noticed there were signs along the road, pray for peace, pray for peace. But don't you think maybe God is thinking, you're the one that has to put it into action. I'm not going to wave some magic wand. The way you pray for peace is to believe that I am the source of that peace and that you and I together are the ones who are going to infuse that into this world. It isn't going to happen by magic. God hands us a shovel, and it's time for us to get our hands dirty with the gritty work of God's kingdom. We have to participate. We have to allow what we confess with our mouths to move our hands and our feet. And if we allow God's grace to be at work in us, then what we confess with our mouths will affect even the ordinary smallest things in our lives, like the purchase history on our credit card statement, like the way we vote, like the way we treat people, the way we spend our time. Just ordinary things, but they matter. They really matter. Love is the norm for everything you and I as Christians do. Love is our purpose. And when Paul cautions them not to insist on getting even, that God will take care of the judging, I've heard it said that that's just another way of kill them with kindness. Well, that kind of goes against everything Paul's just said, doesn't it? I think it's more true that it's not a promise. He's just saying, do what you're called to do. Let God be the judge. It's not a formula. There's no guarantee it's going to work. Keep that in mind. But it is a calling. The story about the rabbi and Larry Trapp, it didn't end where I ended it. It went on. When John and Julie found out after that night together, when they found out that Larry's kidneys were failing, he didn't have any family, didn't have any friends, so they invited him to move into their home. Their daughter had gone off to college. He took the daughter's room. And he was in such bad shape that Julie quit her job so she could care for him. Larry became active in the synagogue. He wanted to become Jewish. John argued with him. He says, "You're Catholic. You don't have to become something else." He said, "No, this is what I want to do." So he became Jewish. He got active in the synagogue. He spent time and effort where he could, going to schools and churches and talking about racism and the harm it does to the world, but also to you. And then he went to the people and the groups, the individuals that he had hurt with all of his racism and hatred, and made amends the best he could. Then John said one morning about 3 o'clock in the morning, Larry Trapp died. He had lived with them for 9 months. And John said, if you think about it, that's the gestation period for a human life. And that Larry in that 9 months came to new life and was reborn. And he experienced life in a way with joy and hope that he had never known before. He finally knew love, he said, and he died a better man than he ever lived. And there were hundreds at his funeral. So what is the hope that you and I proclaim for our lives and for our world? What is this peace that Jesus calls us to? When Jesus was in Jerusalem, he looked out over the holy city and he wept because he said, you don't know, you still don't know the ways that lead to peace. And Paul says, so here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, walking around life, and place it before God as your offering. And readily recognize what God wants from you. Be quick to respond to it. Unlike the culture that's just going to drag you down to this reptilian brain immaturity, let God bring out what's best in you. Love from the center of who you are. Hold on to the good. Bless your enemies. Don't hit back. Discover beauty. Don't let evil take the best of you. Get the best of evil by doing good. This is a message our world, our nation, our culture, our lives need to hear. Can our ordinary lives make a difference? But that's what we're asked to do. I don't know what your gift will be. Some will be great, some will be small, but we're simply asked to let it be our life, to be a gift, to do with what we can. Our sleeping, eating, going to work, walking around life, our plain old life, place it before God as an offering. It's not soft and sentimental, and it's not the least bit easy. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work. It's not a formula, like I said. Yet we are the ones being asked to be brave enough to break the cycle of violence by refusing to participate in it. And then going a step further by being intentionally good when and wherever we can. A final quote from Barbara Brown Taylor. Love is not a warm feeling between like-minded friends. An old imitation of Christ who took all the meanness of the world and ran it through the filter of his own body, repaying evil with good, blame with pardon, death with life. Call it divine reverse psychology. It worked. It worked once. It can work again whenever God can find someone else willing to give it a try. May God help us give it a try. Amen.
So Linda and I were at a school in Clovis, New Mexico
a few years ago, and I want you to hold this image as she has shared with us what we can do. This little school, half of their population had parents in prison, a totally at-risk elementary school, 500 students. And when we walked in, they were having their Friday rally, and it wasn't just one guy or one choir leading this song. As we walked in, the whole school at their rally was singing this song. Oh, let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King and recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, sister and brotherhood, that we are bound together in our desire to see the world become a place in which our children can grow free and strong. Yes, we are bound together by the task that stands before us and the road that lies ahead. We are bound, we are bound. There is a feeling like the clenching of a fist. There is a hunger in the center of the chest. There is a passage through the darkness and the mist. And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. Shine a little light, oh Lord, so that we can see, so that we can see. Just a little light, oh Lord, oh Lord. Wanna stand it on up, gonna stand it on up, stand it on up, oh Lord. Walk it on down, walk it on, shine a little light, oh Lord. Can't get no light from a dollar bill. Don't give me no light from a TV screen. When I open my eyes, I wanna drink my fill from the well on the hill. Do you know what I mean? Shine a little light, oh Lord, so that we can see, so that we can see. Just a little light, oh Lord, just a little light, oh Lord. We wanna stand it on up, stand it on up, stand it on up, oh Lord. We wanna walk it on down, shine a little light, oh Lord. Shine a little light, oh Lord. There is a feeling like a clenching of a fist. There is a hunger in the center of your chest. There is a passage through the darkness and the mist. And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. Oh, let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King and recognize that there are ties between us, all men ties of hope and love, of sister and brotherhood.
So invite everyone to stand, and Linda can dismiss us with a blessing. Maybe take somebody's hand next to you. And then I invite you to stick around afterwards and sing these wonderful words of Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr.
Let us be dismissed. May the grace of God and the love of God fill you, that your life might become an offering to this world, an offering of grace and peace. And may God help us. Amen. I've never heard that song.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Till every child, woman, and man.
Did you hear that one? You heard that one.
Only light drive out darkness. Only light can. Only light can. Hate cannot drive out hate. Till every child, woman, and man. Only love can drive out hate. Only love can. Only love can. We must be the change we want to see. We must be the change. We must be the change we want to see. We must be the change. The darkness cannot drive out darkness till every child, woman, and man. Only the light can drive out darkness. Only light can. Only light can. Hate cannot drive out hate. Every child, woman, and man. Only love can drive out hate. Only love can. Only love can. We must be the change we want to see. We must be the change. We must be the change we want to see. We must be the change. Said we must be the change we want to see. We must be the change. We must live. We must be the change we want to see. We must be the change. We must be the change we want to see. We must be the change.